Welcome to week 3 of HIT 500 Health Statistics. Jumping on here a little bit early prior to career services. I am going to go over your math trivia before they come on. We are going to look at the week 2 question review, and then career services is going to jump in and take over. Now, you have your knowledge checks that is required each week, as well as your applying reflection, and it all leads up to those who are watching the playback. What is maybe or from a website, basically. But I want you to think mathematically as you talk about, what you put in it, the different ingredients, how much. Think mathematically and let's have some fun. This week, you will be reading chapter 4. You're going to be looking at the inpatient bed occupancy. You will be able to determine the beds that are included in bed counts. You're going to read up on how to analyze the bed occupancy percentage. You're going to read how to summarize the direct and indirect bed turnover rate, as well as formulating the direct and indirect bed turnover rate, and constructing the percentage of occupancy for a period when there has been a change in the number of beds during that particular period. Okay, so this is all in chapter 4. As per usual, if there is something that you're like, I just can't figure it out, send me an email and we're definitely going to cover it. Any questions in the beginning of next week's live session. Now, for your math trivia, what is the most popular lucky number? 7. And what math problems are weird? I had 10 chocolate bars and 8 9. What do I have now? Oh, I don't know. Diabetes, maybe? That always gets me because, we have these crazy math scenarios, right? So we're going to go over the highly missed questions. Now, for those of you who are watching the feed or the playback, right? Make sure that you kind of stamp where we're at, because then you'll be able to come back over and over again, okay? Now, for the first question that we're going to cover, it was matching the different terms. So the terms were patient care unit, average daily inpatient census, patient day, and admission day, okay? Make sure you go back and really break down those terms so that you'll have a good understanding when it comes to the midterm and even the final. The reason I say that is because the next question was also matching the appropriate definition: complete master census, daily inpatient census, census day, and what a newborn is. The third question I came across again was definitions: discharge date, inter-hospital transfer, intra-hospital transfer, and then your discharges, okay? We had a couple true and false questions. The term total in front of inpatient service days refers to the average of all inpatient service days for each of the days during a specified period. That is false, right? Another true or false question. It is possible to have 0 inpatient service days for a patient. That is also false. We went over that specifically in last week's live session, okay? So false on both of those. Another question. Transfer ins and transfers out must be equal on a single unit within the hospital. That is false. The inpatient census must always be performed at midnight. Again, false. All right. One of the things about the census is that it needs to be consistent, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to have it at a certain particular time. All right. Inpatient discharges include deaths, transfers to other healthcare facilities, and sending the patients home. And the last question from the quiz that we're going to kind of go over is, when must transfer in and transfers out be equal? This is when looking at the total combined census for the facility. Now that is for the quiz. For your knowledge checks, you had, I think, 5 missed questions for knowledge checks that are repeats from the quiz. So when we see stuff like that, 9 times out of 10, you will see these questions again on your midterm and even maybe your final. The questions that were repeats had to do with the 0 inpatient service days. Okay, we know that's false. The other one was transfers in, transfers out are equal when looking at the total combined census for a facility. You had a couple of problems that you had to work out, which I want to go over with you guys next week, so that if there are any questions, I want to make sure that you guys are comfortable. Another question, would you count 2 patients who died in the ER in the inpatient census? That is no. And then inpatient census must always be performed at midnight. Again, that is false. Okay, so these are just the missed questions from week 2. Now, if there is something that you're like, okay, you didn't cover this one, send me an email. And like I said, in the beginning of next week, we will cover them with week 3's missed questions. Now we are going to hand it over to Career Services.
All right. So good afternoon, evening. I said that again. My name's Ivan Reynoso. I'm the Director of Career Services. And with us tonight, I also have Melissa Raposa, who is our Career Services Officer, who will be working with you guys long-term. So she is here to support you as you continue your education. So you'll see her in the next couple modules in a session like this, but you'll also really work more hand in hand with her as you're closer to graduation and really after graduation. And she's going to be your career coach, your career advocate, helping you apply for jobs, search for leads, for opportunities, pair you up with employers, things like that, so we can help you launch your career in health information management. So also, you're about to all get an email from me, so respond to it because it's for a prize. Happy Health Information Management or Professionals Week. So kudos to you guys as future health information professionals. So what we're talking about today is resumes. I know it's not the most exciting topic. I'm going to say that. I'm not going to lie to you guys, but it's a crucial thing in our lives. So I'm going to try to make it fun for you. I want to introduce the rest of the career services team. So I just talked about Melissa, who's here with us. Jerry is one of our employment specialists. And then we also have Melody, Marcy, Delia, who also are in the career services team, but they support other programs. So Melissa's your go-to person for you guys. So what is a resume? I think you all know what a resume is, and I hope you all have some sort of version of a current resume right now. But there are different types of it. So I want to kind of quickly go through them, and I'm going to tell you which ones I personally prefer, what the more common standard is, and which one would fit for you is really more of a personal choice. We can give you guidance and support on it, but at the end of the day, it's a document that you need to know the ins and outs of, right? Me and Melissa can help you edit it, add things to it, tweak it, but at the end of the day, you need to know cover to cover what's on it because you're the one speaking to it in an interview, right? If you haven't seen Step Brothers, I always like to use this analogy with us in career services where there's that one scene where they're interviewing together and they're giving each other answers and he's in a full tuxedo. Sadly, me and Melissa can't be that person behind you, helping you with those answers, right? But we can get you ready for those scenarios. So what is a resume, right? So obviously, you know, a resume is basically what is your professional experience based out of. Now, if you walk up to someone that you're interacting with at a party or a social gathering or anything, and you introduce themselves to you, there's a social connotation, right? You talk about maybe potentially what you do if you have kids or whatnot, and this and this. Your resume is who you are as a professional. That's the way I like to describe it, right? Who are you as a professional? What experience do you have in related to the job you're applying for, and how you can benefit that organization? Within that, there are multiple hundreds and millions of versions and styles of it. One of the most common is there's three main types, but one of the most common is a chronological resume. Chronological resume is what it basically sounds like: your resume in chronological order, right? Your experience listed in chronological order. One of the things that you may notice as you look at templates, and if you maybe want to look at yours, is most templates always have education towards the bottom. I want you to look at moving that towards the top. So after your objective, your introduction really to yourself, your education should be up to the forefront, because you're now applying for jobs that are going to require certain education and credentialing and licensing, that you want to draw on the fact that, look, I already checked those boxes for you. Here's my relative experience beyond that. So again, the chronological means all your experience is listed in chronological order, right? So most recent or current up on top, and then oldest to the bottom. The next type of resume is a functional resume. And this is for someone who has a lot of experience or too much, and you're trying to wrangle it in. You're going to give someone experience related to, in this sense, could be something that's similar to what you're doing potentially, where you're changing career paths. So you may not list every single job, but you're listing jobs that include, you're tweaking your verbiage on there to make it relevant to the new experience that you're working with. And the last one is the combination resume, which is a mixture of both. And this is what I would personally suggest for you guys to do, is having everything be in chronological sense, but looking at what's on your experience. Now, Monica, I'm going to pick at you. This is not personal. Where have you worked, or what is on your current resume if you have one? What experience levels do you have, or roles? Or just give me a job that you have on there.
The first on my resume is caregiving.
Okay.
And then after that would be sales associate and hairstylist.
Okay. So obviously, if you look at this, right, in terms of health information management, do all three of those jobs directly correlate to the new functionalities that you're applying for? In some cases, most
No.
cases, no, right? But the caregiver ties in a lot more, right? So what we want you to look at, as we're going to ask you to submit new resumes over to Melissa so she can grade them and give you feedback on a new structure for your HIM resume, is what are your bullet points saying beneath that title, right? What are your experience? How are you describing that role? Now, apples for apples, does the caregiver translate into health information management? Literally, no. But are there skills and tools and trades that you did there that will make you a better health information tech? Yes, it will, right? So it's looking at what your descriptors, and even something in your sales position, same thing too. There's going to be things that attention to detail, focusing on, I've been talking all day. Melissa knows this. So I apologize, but reimbursement, right? Sales, you can tie reimbursement into sales because it's all collecting on income, right? And boosting things. Ethics go into that. Privacy, you can even look at the hairstyling stuff and talk about, if you're ever work in any sort of beauty industry, right? What are you? You're almost a therapist at the same time, right? Because people are vomiting, they're telling you things. We do it. I know I was at the barbershop last week and he was asking me random things, and then we were having this conversation. I only see him there twice a month, right? But it's all on your ethics and not reiterating stories. So you can kind of tie that in. Now, one of the things I always tell people is, and students really, in this scenario, is your resume should never be more than a page, no matter how much experience you have. Mine is still 1 page long. I will tell you, I've been working in this sector of education for over 15 years. Now, I'm not going to tell you my age. This wasn't my first job, but my first job is actually on my resume. Why is it on my resume? Because that was a job at Disneyland that I was a photographer that turned into my first management job. I was there for a long time. And at the end of the day, put on your resume what your last title was, right? But my employment date ranges are the same. Why I leave it on there, then have a gap? I leave it on there because it shows my experience in managerial goes as far back as this date, right? And I'm a director, so it kind of correlates to my current job now, right? So it's all on balancing what's going to correlate, what's not. Now, if an employer in an interview ever asks me in an interview why I have a gap, well, my gap's easily understood there because if you look at that gap, that's when I was doing my undergraduate degree. Makes sense. I was a full-time student, right? Was I a full-time student? No, you don't need to know I worked at ADP and at Nordstrom during that time, right? Like it's not relevant to what I'm doing now. And also just helps me save space. At the end of the day, and I'll tell you from my own personal experience, anytime I am having an opening or have candidates come to me, it's the 21st century. The application process can be very easy and tedious at points, which means I will wake up to 400 to 200 emails a day on new applicant submissions. Do you know what the average time I give each resume is? About a second, to tell you the truth, because I'm looking for keywords, key terminology, key things that I'm looking that draws onto that experience. If I don't see that in a glance, that applicants declined. If I do, you move into a new pile that I will give you more time, go deeper into it, then decide whether I'm going to call you, schedule for interview and things like that, right? So in any sort of, whether it's an HR or nowadays, it's a computer algorithm screening things for large employers, right? So if you're applying for hospitals or any large healthcare organization, a lot of times there's AI doing the screening process for them, right? And that screening process is pulling keywords. So this is what I mean by, if you have a current resume that you have and you like it, cool, keep it. But let's tweak it, let's reword it, let's start pivoting it over to your new realm of healthcare and your new career path. Because by having that key terminology, you can do that. Now, as your experience grows in HIM and you are still running at it, if you're starting to go over the one page, let's start removing those older jobs on there and just keep your relevant experience on there, if that makes sense. Now, what I'm sharing with you guys on my screen, you'll notice that this maybe 3 or 4 hours ago, I enrolled all of you in a new course in Moodle. So if you log into Moodle, you'll see that there is a career development course. So these slides are on there. We also have additional resources there for you, i.e. some skill sets that you should be able to walk away with upon completion of the program, some resume templates and some things. This is also where me and Melissa are going to ask you guys by the end of this week to please upload your up-to-date resumes geared towards HIM, so she can give it a once over and then send you feedback back. You'll also notice, which I'll talk about at the end. Never mind, I'm getting ahead of myself. If you haven't noticed, I talk very fast, so stop me if you have questions, and I drink a lot of coffee. So there's main sections in this. This is the I was pointing back to this so you guys can always reference this, but kind of sample of how to list your name. Now, I prefer the top one here because this helps you save space, right? If you notice, the other one is wasting more space. But again, it depends on how much experience and what that structure ultimately looks like. Objectives. Now, this is something that seemed to be an optional thing. This is something that changes. A lot of templates will have this on here. What you're really asking for is really 2 to 3 sentences of what you're seeking within this opportunity. I always advise people to have it on there because you don't know who the screener is. If there's someone that's a little old school, they're going to expect the objective to be on there. I personally prefer it to always be on there. And what you're really seeking is it's 3 introduction sentences: who you are as an HIM professional, what experience do you bring to the table, and how you'll be, and what are you seeking out of this resume? What type of job are you seeking, right? Now, I tell everyone in this sense not to nitpick too much in terms of a certain modality, right? HIM is large. There's a lot of areas that you guys can go into within this field. I don't want you to go, I really only want to deal with collections and escalations on that and really target your objective to be that, because then you're constantly having to tweak it anytime you apply for something that's not within that wheelhouse. And if you don't tweak it and you talk about one of your strengths is attention to detail, you just kind of failed at the attention to detail, right? And here's the thing: I'm not someone who, Melissa will attest to this. When she gets DMs or some emails from me, there's some grammatical errors on that, But if you look at my resume, it is like polished, on point. It's like to the T, because at the end of the day, this is the only thing that someone has to judge you on before you prove yourself in person, right? So you want to make sure that that document is as perfect as can perfectly be. So again, experience and duties, qualifications, and then how you can help that organization and that business, what you bring to the table for them. Qualifications, skills. Now, there's a lot of generic ones that people put on there that you may already have on there. That's fine. Just make sure they're still relevant. But the other thing that you'll notice is one of the common things I'll notice a lot of times when people say they're bilingual, they just put bilingual. And I'm like, bilingual in what? And I'm someone who I can attest that I'm bilingual, right? But I also grew up with the bilingual household. So it's more of, I like to say, Spanglish, right? Not a true proper Spanish half the time, and not a true proper English. When you say you're bilingual in a job, you need to know the terminology associated with what you're going to be dealing with, right? So if you're putting that you're bilingual in any sort of language you are, I would do some research, because if they're bilingual, they may quiz you on that. You know, what is it? What is medical record in that language? How do I literally translate it where it wouldn't be misconstrued and I'm not using some sort of slang or anything like that? You want to make sure that you're doing your due diligence on that side. But the other thing that you'll notice on here is these are some sample HIM type duties, but you'll have in the course, there's a whole list of it. Don't add them on there because we're giving them to you. Only add right now what you know you're confident and can be quizzed on and know in and out. And as you continue your education with us, Melissa's going to ask you to update your resume at the end of closer to you finishing the program. Then we want to relook at it. I always tell everyone your resume should always be a living, breathing document. It should never be something that you only look at when you're applying. So when you're actively applying, it's ready to go. Now, if you're doing a job right now, and then you get trained on something new or a new modality or a new thing that you got exposed to, let's just add it all on there. And then we'll look at it later and clean it up, because it's a lot of times easier to remove things than it is to be like, wait, what did I do there? Or how did I do this? Or wait, I don't remember that really interesting, what was that name of that software that we used at that org, right? So it's add more now. And when we're actively searching, we can clean it up, tighten it up, make it a little bit prettier if that needs to be. Any questions on any of this so far? Okay. Education. I told you guys a lot of times it moves towards the bottom. If your template does that, I recommend moving it over to the top, because you're going to be applying for that. Now, there's proper ways to list your education. This is why I do spend some time on this. You want to make sure that you're including the full name of the institution and the city and state that the institution is based out of, right? Now, you may not be in Los Angeles and you may not be coming to Los Angeles. I am also out of state myself, but my employer is still based out of Los Angeles, right? Your degree is still coming out of Los Angeles. So it still needs to be listed on there. What you can already do, and what I recommend you to already do it, is you can put projected grad date. You can put expected completion, month and year that you're forecasting to complete. I should have looked before, us. I would have already told you guys what month and year that is for your cohort. So here's one sample, and here's a sample of how yours would be listed as an associate. So it's an AAS is an abbreviation for an applied associates in science. In health information technology, the school is CBD College. We're based out of Los Angeles, California, and you see that in this case it says graduated May 2020. That can be simply be tweaked to projected completion or a future date on there, and that's easy to understand. Here you'll see that this individual is listing that they're a 4.0 and they were on the dean's list. Technically, I should correct that because that should be the president's list. But if you have those accolades that you want to showcase, do it. Now, if you had an okay GPA, don't list it. You don't have to list your GPA. Only if you're like way at the top, right? Now, and I'll tell you this from someone who hires someone who didn't have the most amazing GPA in their undergrad. Does it really matter for when you're doing the job? No, right? Because it's all on how you perform for that organization, right? In some cases, they may tie that into it, but it's not something that's going to deter, oh, I need you to have a certain GPA to work for me, right? It's really just, if it's really good, then list it. If it's not really good, then just omit it out of there. with your BLS and your CPR cert, if you have it on here, you always want to list this in the sense of when it's expiring or when it's scheduled to expire, right? So if you're applying for a job, even though you guys a lot of times are going to be in the back end, right? You're not really patient safe, not in every setting, but in some settings that you may choose to, you may not be face to face. That healthcare organization or that hospital may still have the rule that you need all up-to-date vaccinations as if you're in front of a patient. You need to also be BLS and CPR certified. So if that's an expectation from them, you have it on there and you're also telling them that it's not expiring next month or next week. I still have another 6 months before I have to renew it, because then that gets them going on re-updating that for you. And you always want to make sure that you divulge who it's from, whether it's the American Heart Association or the American Red Cross. Now, right now, the American Heart Association is more the gold standard for CPR and BLS. 10 years ago was a Red Cross Association. Sometimes they flip-flop. Just make sure that you stay up to date with it. Next section on here is your experience. So this is just a sample of how to list it. My main thing with this is it doesn't have to literally be in this structure, but if you're using something like this, that all of your jobs are following that same structure, right? And everything on there. Now, in this case, the organization is based out of there. One thing that has changed a lot of times now is it's listed. Oops, if I could type all of a sudden. It could be something that's listed. The company may be based out of Los Angeles, but in this case, this was a remote position. I worked virtually, right? This can go your way if you're applying for jobs that are remote. Now, can you work in your field in a remote setting? Yes. Is it common for someone entry level to work in a remote setting in this field? No. Does it mean it's impossible? No. But don't put all your eggs in one basket. And when you're working with Melissa, say, I only want remote positions. Okay. Well, I can, but I'm going to tell you, you're not going to get a lot of calls back, right? Because they're looking at the experience. Sometimes some employers and some healthcare organizations, they want to know that you have a proven track record to be working remote, or they may start you hybrid, right? You're going to be in the office for the first 6 months, and then you go into a 2 days a week on ground and the rest from home, right? And have a balance of that. And that's something that can be common too. So just don't ever put your eggs in one basket. Optional sections, so volunteer work, hobbies I don't recommend, but volunteer work, especially if it's related to healthcare, right? If you volunteer as a candy striper at a hospital, which is starting to open up now past our COVID world, but also even just volunteering within healthcare organizations, right? Doing charity walks, sponsorships, things like that, that showcases humanity. Now, this is also just dependent on space. A lot of people just don't have the space for this. Resume length, I talked about this. It's really down to 1 page. It really should be 1 page. If for some reason you cannot get it down to 1 page and you have it to 2 pages and you're interviewing in person, always have copies with you. Never double-side it. Always have it as 2 separate pages, because sometimes people don't flip it, right? It's the smallest things. And this is, at the end of the day, this is what you're being geared towards. But remember that 20 seconds about scanning time. I told you personally, I do about 2 to 5 seconds. It depends on the flow of what's coming in on there. Okay, so the design, less is more. It doesn't have to be the most prettiest or most ornate thing. It really just needs to come down to the point. Now, it's all aesthetic. So if it catches your eye and you like it, go with that template. If it doesn't, but don't have something that's very, like if you're using Google Docs, don't go with the first option that Google Docs pops up, because it's just a little too basic, for my opinion, as I'm looking at them. And I say that for someone who reviews resumes, because they just start all to wash. If mine and Melissa's looks just like you, Kanisha, and Stephanie and Monica, and Miss Teresa's looks different, Miss Teresa is going to get a little bit of a different eye and more time on it, right? Because ours just look like one from the other, just the words just changed a bit, but they looked identical, right? So make sure it still has some style. But what I mean by less is more is I've seen, I remember once I had a student come to my office and say, look, I'm so proud of it. Look, it's like a rose gold thing and this and that. And I was like, oh, that's nice. It's really pretty. And you're a Mac user, I can tell. I am too. You did this on Pages. I know the template. I said, but have you looked at how this prints? And she's like, oh yeah, look, I print. No, I said in black and white. Some organizations don't use color. How does this look like? Now, then I printed it for this individual in black and white. They noticed how opaque and just it didn't look well. And then I Xeroxed it after that, which then made it even worse quality. And they realized that less is more on that. Not saying you don't need to have color on there, but you shouldn't have like a whole layer of like a tone on there underneath, right? Pops of color here and there, that's all great. But just what does this look like if it was printed black and white? What does this look like if I'm on night mode with my computer screen, right? How does this look like in other forms? How would this look like on a mobile device? All those little things to kind of look at and think of. Font size. Don't go huge. Don't do anything like that. It really is 10 to 12 is the normal standard. And most times they're going to be looking at it at a screen. So you want to kind of keep it to that. Your page margin should be consistent all around. Sometimes Word documents and Google Docs don't do it. So just make sure that your margins are just standard. If you're typically it's like 1 inch. If you're noticing that you're having trouble going into one page, adjust it to be what is the minimums for the printer, right? And then push it all the way further, and that gives you more space, and that moves everything a little bit higher. So those like little things on that. Now, as if you have a current resume that you're going to now be tweaking as your assignment to submit to Melissa, and it just starts fighting you, and the layout just got janky or it messed up on you, and you're about to throw your computer through a window because it's just frustrating you, trust me, it happens to me, and it's going to happen to Melissa. You may even have us tell you, you know what? We're going to copy all this information out and let's choose a new template. If you look at whether it's Word, Google Docs, or whatever platform you're using for your document, it may be a basic Word doc at a whole, but there's Excel tables and formulas all hidden within that. And sometimes if we move things around, we mess with the formatting, and sometimes it's just if we can't recover it. We can, but we're going to spend a lot of time and frustration. It's maybe best to look at something else. References, never include your references on your resume. Stephanie, I'm going to pick at you. Kanisha, you unmuted yourself. I saw that first.
Oh, I was gonna say you froze for a second. I didn't catch the last part.
Sorry. So references, they should never be included on your resume. You can put a line as a footer saying references available upon request, but never list your references on there. Do you know why I recommend not to list them on there?
Because they're probably gonna call or no.
Well, yeah, they should, right? But and they may ask you for that, right?
Yeah.
And it's good to provide them. But who you're asking these people to call, they should get a heads up from you. Not just a heads up that, hey, I'm listing you as a reference, and then 6 months later they get a call about you and they totally forgot.
Oh yeah, that's true.
It should be something recent, right? If it's your current boss or your a previous boss or mentor, you kind of, that's good that they're going to speak highly of you, but you want to give them a heads up recently, like within time of them calling, right?
Gotcha.
Now, networking is key, and you're going to have another session on with us with Melissa on networking, but I want to preface it with networking is the key to your success. The first job in HIM for you guys will be the hardest job to get. Why? You have an unproven track record, right? Once that first door opens up, it's your name, your recognition, what your abilities bring to the table. Networking is happening behind the scenes, right? So prime example happens within this. As I told you, I've been working in education for a long time. Now, when Melissa came to me not that long ago, her previous campus president who hired her, who I've worked with in the past, referred her over. Now, did I ask this into Melissa? I'm sorry I'm sharing this, but did I ask Melissa for references? No, I respected this person that I've worked with for a long time and I know are true professional. I asked this person a lot of questions about how this employee was for them, how Melissa performed for them, how things are going, right? And this happens all the time. I can't tell you how many times this happens, right? So you think sometimes that our worlds are a little small, but our industries are huge. And people don't know about HIM too well, right? I know you probably had these conversations with maybe your roommates, your significant other, your family members of like, wait, what are you learning? What are you doing? Well, if you didn't exist, none of us have healthcare records, right? There's a true you're the custodians of our files. You're behind the scenes. So, but because people outside of your realm doesn't know what you bring to the table, what you do, does that mean that people within your realm don't know about? They all know each other. People connect all the time. They attend conferences. There's opportunities, right? And they see that, oh, you worked at Sharp Hospital in San Diego. I know someone who used to work there. I worked with them at this hospital. I'm going to ask them if they ever knew you there or ask things. So a lot of this stuff with references sometimes is happening behind the scenes. So that's why for you, biggest advice for your career is never burn a bridge, no matter how much you dislike that organization, that supervisor, anything like that, because you don't know when your paths are going to cross again. And I've seen this happen. I remember once I had someone saying, oh, I can't stand this organization. They just don't value employees, this and that, blah, blah, blah. To a new organization. Guess who bought that company all of a sudden? The one they just left. Right? Now, you never know how your paths are going to cross, right? Or who that person knows. Like if you're speaking poorly about this person that you used to work with, that was your supervisor, you'd feel like they respected you, and you're telling Miss Teresa who's interviewing you, and Miss Teresa knows that person. It's not going to go well, right? So you always want to protect what your brand is, and your brand is you and what you bring to the table. So Melissa will talk about this in a later session, but my biggest advice to you now is, if you haven't, privatize your social media accounts, because employers Google you. They have your email. It's really easy to search people's social media handles. And what you do on your personal life has nothing to do with what you're going to do as a professional for that organization. So you'd never want them to judge you on that. Or need to judge you. They should judge you on what your resume says and what abilities you bring to the table, right? That's it. So that's what I want you guys to focus on. Checking your spelling, grammar, and tenses. Now, whether you're using Google and Word and you hit that spell check button and everything came back clean, does that mean you're done? No, it doesn't, it's not going to catch everything, right? And if you've been working on this for a while, hit up Miss Melissa, send her an email. Hit us up. We are always here for it. If you look in Moodle, there also is, if you ever want to schedule an appointment, it's going to ping you and actually drop you on my calendar. But we're always open to those scenarios where we can see what else potentially is coming down the pipeline. But at the end of the day, you need to make, a lot of times, have different eyes look at it, right? Spouse and another, put it away for a week, bring it back out and be like, oh, wow, I can't believe I just had that in there. That was dumb. I need to remove that, right? So it's just, sometimes it's best to walk away. Like, think if you're cramming for a midterm and a final and you just feel like, I'm just sat here and read this chapter 6 times and I don't feel I did anything. I don't remember what I just read. We need to take a break. We need to reassess what is going on. I'm someone, if you haven't noticed, who my mind is constantly always running. So anytime I'm auditing things, because I know my mind will look elsewhere as I'm doing things, classical music's playing in the background. I learned that was in my undergrad in college. I can't do things in silence. I have to do things so my mind doesn't think elsewhere. Classical music will not get me to vibe or do anything differently or redirect focus. I'm just focused on what, elevator music. That's what I basically listen to. So focus on what's on here. So I'm not going to break you guys into groups this time, but we'll come back to that. Columns. Do you have columns? Do we recommend columns? Up to you. Really, it really comes down to what's on here. In this example, you'll see that there is one column. I don't recommend more than one. Okay. You'll notice that on this case, on the far left, all this person is listing is all of their experience. And then on the right, they added their skills, their education, and their references. Now, again, I don't recommend to list your references fully there. I would have it as a footer and say you can divulge them upon request. With this works for someone who has a lot of relative experience, right? If you don't, then having it all on one side works well. But if you have your blank side a little too wide, then it just looks like we're trying to stretch it out, right? So you want to make sure that there's a good mixture of that. And here, if you notice, there is color. Their name is a forefront to it, right? The font's a little bit different. Same thing with their headers, right? There's a little bit of character, there's a little bit of style, but I know I can print this out in black and white. I can make a photocopy of this and it wouldn't take away from the messaging going on, right? There's no watermark. I've seen recently a lot of resumes that people include like a headshot, their picture, right? So maybe I include one on mine. It's up to you if you want to. I honestly don't recommend it because at the end of the day, what you look like has nothing to do with why you're applying for the job. This isn't your headshot, right? Like, you're not trying to be an actor. it's about your skills. So my thing is I wouldn't personally, but if you want to, that's up to you. Okay. So should you lie on a resume to make sure that you stand out or that you get more attention? No, because if you ever get caught in a small, even the most honest little lie, I now know, don't believe anything else you just told me. What you have on here is just all wash, right? So you only want to sure that you know it in and out, right? So yes, if you send me your bullet points and Miss Melissa, your bullet points on what you want to include on your resume, could we turn it around and give you a really pretty resume real quickly? Yeah. But do you really know what's on it? No, you don't know if Melissa embellished something here or did something there, right? So it's all on those aesthetics, on making sure that you're always giving everything on not doing that. There's multiple areas, right, that you can be caught in a line, whether it's by digging deeper into it, by asking more questions on that follow through. I may have just realized that you're not telling me the truth, by your references, by our networking opportunities. At the end of the day, is job hunting fun? I think we've all done it to some degree. No, it's not fun, right? But it's something we have to deal with, right? It's like death and taxes, right? It's something that we'll deal with in our lives. But you've got to make sure that we're always putting that best foot forward. Now, I remember I had someone say, oh, you know, I didn't apply for that opportunity that you guys sent over to me because that application takes like 45 minutes to fill out. Well, the employer does a lot of, sometimes if they set up these firewalls, it deters people that aren't really fully seeking. It helps them not see 200 resumes a day, right? It helps really clean up things and not have people come all the way through. So take the time, apply for it. It's not the most funnest, but it's stuff that we have to do. How much do resumes gaps matter? I will tell you personally, I could care less if you have a resume gap. I will tell you that my boss will dig deep in an interview when you have resume gaps. So a lot of times it has to do with the personality of that individual, assessing why there's a gap. Gaps sometimes cause people to ask questions, right? Why is there a gap? Why did you stop working for some time? If you have it and you need to just be prepared to answer towards it, right? So whether, like I told you in my case, I was doing my undergrad, right? So if you're going to have an employment gap, well, and it's the same time period you're a student at CBD college, then there's an easy answer for it, right? You always just want to make sure that you're prepared at the end of the day to answer it and addressing anything in potentially in the cover letter. And if you haven't seen what a cover letter should look like or what the expectations are, your cover letter, I think almost everyone's heard tell me your elevator pitch, or have you heard the elevator pitch saying? You guys can just nod or no. Okay. So elevator pitch setting is, think if you're in an elevator with someone, how much time do you really have with that person standing in front of you or next to you in the elevator? Not much more than a couple minutes at most, right? Yeah. So if you're telling someone who you are as a professional, what you bring to the table in an elevator pitch, you have 2 minutes to tell me, who are you? Tell me now. Why am I going to hire you? Right? That's your cover letter. Why you're a recent grad from CBD college, from health information technology. You just got your credentialed, right? Because we're putting that in the universe. You guys are going to get your credential before that. You can showcase that. And then what skill set you bring to the table that you've learned and what relative experience that you bring to the table, right? So what's on your resume that will make you a better start? If I was a barista at Starbucks and now I'm applying to be an HIM professional, does that correlate? I saw the pause and I saw the questioning. It kind of does, right? And it can. It's all on how you tell me it correlates. How does it correlate? I mean, Kanisha, I saw you kind of say yes. What would you think it would be an easy bullet point or an easy point that you can see it correlates to?
I would go like the customer service route. Engaging with people, being knowledgeable about what you're doing with your job.
Exactly, right? And if you think about it, when you walked into Starbucks and there's a massive line, who's the most stressed? The barista seeing those empty cups just pile up next to them, right? And just trying to go through
So
all
how you manage,
how you manage that. What is your face saying in a stressful moment, right? Are you approachable still to an individual, right? I remember one of my first jobs I told you guys was Disney. I remember like my first week, I was so just beyond exhausted and tired. And I got a firm warning from my lead saying, if you put your hands in your pocket again, you're going to get written up. And there's a whole binder that when you work there, can't have your hands in your pocket, can't point with one finger. You have to point with your whole hand or two fingers. You need to, aesthetics wise, there's certain amount. Back then you couldn't have any facial hair. I remember they would send people to go home or shave if you even had any sort of stubble. No visible tattoos. I know a lot of the stuff they've lifted. Crossing your arms, you can't cross your arms in front of when you're on stage, when the client can see you, right? Why do they have that? Because their whole thing is family time, because a better theme park experience than your neighboring theme park, right? More of a full service thing. If I'm standing there in a corner at a store, and maybe let's say I'm a salesperson and you have a question, do I look like someone you want to ask that question to? I still may be smiling, but my arms are crossed. I don't look approachable, right? So those are those little things, and those are things that stick. And now for the rest of my life, I still point with two fingers. So if you ever see someone point with two fingers, I guarantee you can tell them they probably worked at a Disney theme park at one point in their lives. So just making sure that you're confident in what you're bringing to the table is what's key to that. Resume. So what if I have no experience in the medical field? Well, I kind of already talked about that, right? Drawing your current experience, how does this correlate? How does this make you a better health information health information manager, right? So there's multiple words to say within your role. Externship experience. Melissa's going to ask you to be listing your practicum on your resume when she sees you at the end. Now, your practicum's 40 hours. Does that mean you did a ton? Did that mean you were by yourself? No, the whole point of your practicum is to observe, network, because these people may help you open that door for the next job, or for your first job, or for the job that you may come across with them in 3 years from now, right? So it's all about putting that best foot forward. But what this does, but why we ask you to put your practicum on there, is it tricks these AI algorithms for more relevant experience, right? Now, as long as it's properly listed, you're not going to list that you're literally working. Your title isn't going to be the person you were shadowing, right? You're not a record analyst. You're not a health information technician or anything like that. Your title would be more health information tech, intern. That was the functionality you were doing there, right? Because at the end of the day, if they were trying to contact that employer, verify, or like in a background report that you didn't work for them, we would verify that for them, right? That you did your practicum through us, but at that facility. So it's just important. Now, as your experience level grows in your field, that's an area that you're just going to omit. It's just going to fall off. But for the most part, this right now, when you're starting new in a field, this helps you get past those HR walls, those computer algorithms. It shows that more relevant experience in your field. Okay, so how far back should you go? Now, I told you I went back to my first job. I'm not going to tell you how long ago that was, but that's pretty far back for me. Now, then there's a massive gap in there. But in my case, I've had not a ton of jobs, right? So a lot of what's listed on there shows very long longevity with each organization or university or college that I've worked at. Going back to gaps, longevity within organizations is an attribute for you on your resume, because it shows that you're loyal to them, you're loyal to the organization, you're loyal to the functionalities that you're bringing to the table. If you are switching roles every year or every 2 years, it's very easy as you're looking at a resume to look like, oh, they're a jumper. There's a pattern here that every couple of years, they're just the job switching, something's changing, right? So you want to make sure that we start to look at what those date ranges look like. Is there a pattern? Do I have a pattern issue? Right? Do we want to like analyze things like that? So how far back you should go, it really is going to be individually, but most commonly it's no more than 10 years. Typically is how far back people go, but it's all on space related, right? And how it correlates to this job function. Do I want you to go back 10 years to list every job you had on there if they really don't correlate, or apples to apples, or if it's restaurant? No, because they just look repetitive, right? Relevant experience, yes, let's go back 10 to 15 years. Listing older jobs, add a lot more length. So this is where you want to look at where my length, what this does to my resume. So again, do you have to go back 10 years? No. If your length is still good at 1 page and you're maybe going 5 years back, then we're good here. You need to mentally be prepared to know your 10 years worth of employment history, because that's usually stuff that they will ask you in the formal application or in the or in a background process, right? So you're making sure that you have that on here. Now here's my exemption, and this is what I told you guys. Exemptions are rare unless it's something you really want to impress them with or tie back into it, right? So for me, I told you this was my first job in management. I wanted to showcase that I've been in management for a long time. So that's why I keep it on there. At the end of the day, it's a document that's about you. It's designed to market you, and not our new Instagram way of like marketing, right? But in who are you as a piece of paper? And that sounds horrible to say, but we're not pieces of paper. But if that's all I have to judge you on how to work for me, how to do the job for me, is it putting your best foot forward? So spend some time with it. Make sure that you're looking at those things and like kind of making sure it's adequate for what you're doing. Any questions on resumes? I know I talk fast and I said a lot of things, but there's a lot of resources that we're dumping into, or not dumping, but that are on your career development course that you got access to. What we're talking about today, session 1. Don't look at session 2, don't look at session 3 or any other ones on there until Melissa pings you for those. References, I already talked about that, so I'm going to skip that area. Reference sheet, I personally, I'm very OCD and aesthetically pleasing. So if you have like a certain style that you like your resume structure with, I recommend that you follow that same structure, that same format for your reference sheet. Same thing for your cover letter. So as if we're looking at all 3 documents separately, they all play with one another. They all look the same. It's like stylized for you. This is Stephanie. This is who she is. This is her aesthetics, right? Application strategies. Talked about that. If a job application is asking you to upload this, now upload your BLS. Now give me proof of this. Upload your transcripts. Give me this. They're doing that as firewalls to inhibit people from applying. Still spend the time on it. Still push through. It's very normal for them, and you probably have already faced this in an interview, for them to ever ask you, is it okay if I contact your current employer or your most recent employer? Do they? Do I? Have I ever? Unless I know them, I never will. Do I ask that a lot of time? Yeah. Why? What did the face just do right now? Right? What did you like? Oh, I don't know. Right? Is there truth on this document, or is there a lie? Right? So just make sure to be prepared on what your face is doing. And I know in an interview there's a lot of high stress, and Melissa's going to give you a lot of good feedback in a 3rd session with you guys on how to answer tough questions, how to answer questions that are illegal, how to go around them so you don't answer a legal question, and you don't also be like, you just answered me a legal question, you can't ask me that. The whole thing's just done, right? But how do you go around that, right? So there's a lot of resources that we can give to you, but at the end of the day, it's making sure that you know what the resume says about you will help you be confident and comfortable in an interview. Doing your research in advance on that organization for that position. If there's something that you really want to highlight on your resume and I didn't ask you a question about it, they're going to ask you, do you have questions for me? Ask the leading question, right? What do I mean by a leading question? Well, if I was really excited about telling you how I can deal with conflict resolution or difficult patients or customers that are having discrepancies, or the doctor ordered this surgery and the insurance blocked it, and you're stuck in the middle dealing with both of them, like how do you deal with that? And you had exposure to that and I didn't ask you about that. Ask that question. Do you have any questions for me? Oh, actually I do. What is your process on dealing with a patient, or a patient who's just really upset when the insurance blocks something and the doctor's ordered it? How do you advocate for them, or what is your protocols behind that? I'm going to give you that answer back. And then you'll be like, oh, actually, I've done that in my previous job. There you go. That's your leading question, right? You're showcasing that I can already do this. And this also helps them visualize you can do this, right? And in some cases, in most times, if you're Googling like interview stuff or things that the people are asking, it's okay to give them real world scenarios, but be careful on HIPAA, right? This is where you can go down the rabbit hole. You help them visualize and give scenarios where you're not giving specifics or violating someone's privacy. However, you're making it so it's still relatable. Does that make sense? So you're speaking a bit more vaguely with it, but you're not going to specify like it was this surgery and it was this individual and it was, and yeah, I know you're not going to give them their date of birth, but still you want to make sure that you're not violating anything along those manners. So by the time you see Miss Melissa, and probably not me, sorry, but just Melissa, she's gonna giving you feedback on it. You'll notice that when you, I'm asking you guys to upload your resumes by the end of this week. So what is it? Where are we in week 3? I have my cheat sheet. So by the end of week 3 with your assignments this week, if you can go onto your career development course with HIM and upload your resume. That way next week, Melissa can draw them down, give you feedback, and if it has anything that she recommends for you to change or we're good at this point, then she'll give you feedback on that. You'll notice when you're uploading in Moodle for us in career development, career services, it'll say we're asking you a lot of times to share a link. So if you're using Google Docs, share the link with us and make, in this case, Melissa the editor. Melissa, if in the chat, if you can put your Gmail friendly CBD account email address. What this allows her to do is for her to see it in real time. So she's going to make comments on it that you'll get populated. She's not going to make changes unless you accept the changes. But as you're constantly tweaking it and updating it, she always will have visibility to your most recent resume, right? So as you're getting closer to graduate and we're asking you for your updated resume and you already were updating it, she's not going to ask you for it because she's just going to pull it down and have it for her records. So as she's helping you apply for jobs, she can also be sending it on your behalf. Does that make sense? So you'll notice that if you're using Google Docs, we have a cheat sheet on that. If you're using Microsoft, we have a cheat sheet for that too. So what your preferences in terms of documents, we have that on there. You'll also see you'll also see a lot of other resources on there. So feel free to peek at it. But everything in session 1 is what we talked about today. What we're expecting you is really just an updated resume. Now, if you have your resume right now that you like, cool, use it, but tweak it. Don't just submit it to Melissa because she's just going to reject it back and send it back to you and be like, there's nothing about HIT on here, right? So make sure that you add your education, that it's in progress. Make sure that you start tweaking your bullet points for your resume, because then you won't have to do it later. If you do, you're just tweaking it and we're not having to look at the whole thing as it has. So taking it piece by piece, if that makes sense. So, and if you have any questions, you can email her or myself. And in the chat, Melissa, if you can also put your normal email and your direct dial line, so that way you guys can text her or call her if you have any questions on that with reasonable duties. You know, she's not going to answer at 9 o'clock at night. She'll probably get back to you the next day, but on that. Any questions on resumes or that? I hope I made this topic fun. I warned you it wasn't going to be fun, but I like to make it somewhat fun because let's be real, it's late in the day. You might have been working today. Yay, we're talking about resumes today. It's not what was on your radar. It's not what you wanted to check the box for today, but it's something that we have to deal with and we have to do. So make sure that you utilize it on that sense. You can message us on Moodle, but we don't always live in Moodle. We're not like Miss Teresa. We live on the other side of it because you guys are only when we pop in for these live sessions. So email is where we live and our phones. So feel free to hit us up at any point. But I'm looking forward to seeing your guys' first drafts to your resumes as you guys will submit by the end of this weekend. And for when I meet with Melissa, she'll be like, I love that class's resumes. Did you look at them? They're like this and that, or very minor edits that we had to do. Now, I'll preface you with this and I'll leave it here. Melissa or I may say, love your resume, it's good. Then you send it to Miss Teresa or your program director, the other Melissa, Miss Cotton. And they're like, oh, why don't you have here? And you're like, oh, I did, but Ivan asked me to remove it. Oh, no, don't listen to him. Just put it back on. I'm not going to take offense to that, nor should you. At the end of the day, it's also a personal document. So someone's also going to then relate to what their aesthetics were or what they have on there, right? Melissa may come to you and say, Kanisha, I need you to add this on there. And you're like, well, I didn't have it on there because I wasn't exposed to it that much. Like, okay, well, we can talk about that in an interview, but I know this employer is specifically looking for that line. Right. A lot of times this is where I want you to make sure that you guys befriend and earn and work with Melissa long term, because at the end of the day, if it's an employer that we have a relationship with, they may tell us things they're not going to tell you, and we then can tell you how to get prepared for that scenario, right? And help you, give you those extra tools, right? You may apply somewhere and they're not getting back to you, but me and Melissa may be able to get some more headway, more answers from them, right? So little things like that is why we're here as your career advocate, your career coach. Now, does this mean when you graduate and you're credentialed that you're going to come to Miss Melissa and say, hey, I'm ready to get working. What jobs do you have for me? She's not going to come out and be like, here's 5 options. Which one are you taking? Sadly, I wish it would work that way, but it doesn't, right? So it's a partnership. And I'm going to say this, it's an 80-20 partnership. 80% of the effort has to come from you. 20% comes from us. Sounds like a horrible relationship, not very customer service driven, right? But can we apply for jobs on your behalf? Yes, but no, we're not going to. You need to apply for jobs on yourself. We can help you source things. We can help you develop things. Now, can we interview for you? No, but we can help remind you, hey, don't forget tomorrow you have an interview. Did you prep for it? Do you have any questions? Do you need any help from me, right? But I can't show up, right? If you need advice on what to wear, we can help you with that, but we can't dress you for it, right? So those are the little things. And this is why I might want to make it a little funny. But at the end of the day, don't only rely on the leads and opportunities Miss Melissa sending to you. Do your own research, your own due diligence. But the more you get to interact with her, the more she really will understand what in particular you're looking for. Does that make sense? Because everyone's realm is going to be very different. You're not one of our graduates from ultrasound, right? Because the job is ultrasound. Like, it's one title. There's not much realm in it. It's on the location and hospital and clinic, right? And you're in health information management. There is this track, there's this track, there's this track, and there's this track, right? She's going to send generic leads to you when you first kick off, but unless she knows exactly what you're really wanting, which niche you're looking at specializing, what really interests you at this point, then she can help you tailor that and search that further. So with that, it's not just your first job. You have Melissa and career services for life. So whether your practicum offered you a job or you started working and 6 years later you're looking for something different, don't forget about us. A lot of times we have employers that say, I don't want someone entry level, but who do you have that who has graduated 4 years ago? I need someone who has at least about 3 years of experience. What do? E-blast alumni from that long ago. And that's when the best opportunities come your way, when you're actually not looking. Then you can really weigh out your advantages, right? What is this opportunity going to give me? Is it just the money, or is it more responsibility? Is it more of this? Will I grow further? Do I want to grow further? And you can make your pros and cons list. I'll say that from my own personal experience. When I came to CBD college 7.5 years ago, I was not looking. The college found me based on my network. Someone else who I've worked with, and I was like, I live in Orange County. I'm not commuting to LA every day. And for 3.5 years, I was on the train for 3 hours back and forth, right? Now, it was on the train, so watching Netflix, reading, napping, a little bit different. I worked on the train, so I was productive. If I drove that time, I would probably not have lasted. But now I work remote. My commute's 2 minutes, right? But did it start that way? Would I've applied for a job that was that far? No. But I never say no to a meeting, an interaction, an opportunity. Let's hear them out. Let's see what they can provide, what the opportunity are and what can bring to the table. And I've never looked back elsewhere. So again, cast that net far and wide and see how much fish we can catch within that. On that note, I will end it here so I can get some water and stop talking. It's been a pleasure seeing you guys tonight. I'm glad a couple of you turned on your cameras, and Kanisha and Stephanie, I appreciate the laughs and smiles. So it helps me feel that I'm not really just crazy and talking to myself, that some of my jokes do land, but they're still related to what we're talking about. So I hope you guys have a good evening, and I'm excited to see your resume submissions. In next module, or not. Yes, next module. You'll see Melissa again, not this term. But basically between now and upon completion, you're going to see her once every term. So this helps to get to know her and her to get to know you. So very exciting topics. You'll see that in your course in session 2, 3, and 4 coming up, that what the topic is. We're not expecting you to complete those assignments or submit anything or read anything, that stuff in advance. We'll talk about it during those sessions as each one. So what you need to do is just review everything that's in session 1 right now, which a lot of that supplemental research information or additional information for you, templates, sample resumes, do's and don'ts, and upload your most recent HIM targeted resume, not just your current resume, okay? We will shoot it right back and put an incomplete grade on there. It needs to be geared towards HIM. All right. Anything else for me or Melissa?
No questions. Thank
Yeah.
you for all the information.
Awesome. Well, thank you for participating. I hope you guys have a good rest of your evening.
You too. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you both, Melissa.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.
Wait, do we still have class?
You do, Kanisha, but the rest of us are good.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say, we didn't cover statistics.
Have a good night, everybody.
Good night.
Bye bye.